Hey everybody, welcome back. This is going to be part 5 where I walk you through my journey of Dave's 7 baby steps. My history with Dave goes way, way back. I think I found him when he had just written his second book, so I've been through all of the different new editions and revisions and new books that he's written. I was also able to see him in one of his seminars, so I got to actually see him in person. That was really great. I want to preface this by saying that my husband has not really been on board with this. And that is not to throw him under the bus or anything like that. He is well aware of how he is and how I am. We have a really good working relationship, but he hasn't really seen the vision. He did go to the seminar with me. He's read the books. We've talked about it a lot. It's just not his thing. Dave talks a lot about spenders and savers, and obviously my husband is the spender. And he just thinks differently than I do. But as you can see, and as I will go through this, here we are sitting at step 6. So no matter what your situation is, whether you're doing this alone or with a more reluctant spouse, you can still make progress and still get through the steps. So let's start with the very first one, which is $1,000 in your emergency fund. There actually is a pre-baby step, and that is to make sure that you're current on all of your bills and that you have come up with a zero-based budget, which if you don't know what that is, it's just you assign a dollar amount to every single category. There's nothing, no money left on the table. Everything has a name to it. After you do that, then you can start on the first one. So for me, I talked in one of my past videos about rolling pennies. This is where I started rolling pennies because that's all we could afford at the time. And then I was able to gradually move up to quarters, etc., and then finally to bills. So this took me a while to get through. We were really struggling at the time, and that's all we could do. So this probably took me about a year. It was a really great day when we got this. My husband was very thrilled about it, and we ended up having to use this shortly afterwards, as Dave talks about. You will, if you need your emergency fund, it's a good thing it's there. So our air conditioner needed some repairs, and that was very important because we were living in Arizona at the time. The second time I got my emergency fund was a lot quicker, more like just a few months, and I was able to use mostly bills and then also my change. So that's how I did it. I didn't sell anything. My husband wasn't really into that and not very supportive, but it's okay. That's just something that he doesn't like to do, and that's fine. The second part, paying off consumer debt. At the time, I had to rack my brain because it's been so long, but I think we had about $6,000 in credit cards. We had $17,000 in student loans. And then unfortunately, we had 2 new cars that we bought that we had to get paid off. So really dumb, naive choices. They were bad, but we had to pay them off. That probably took about, I'm going to say, 4 to 5 years for that, and that was great. Unfortunately, we had happened to us, which is probably everybody's worst nightmare, where my husband, with the company that he was with at the time, he did not get paid for a year. That's right, a solid year. It was a terrible time, both personally and with our family. And unfortunately, we had to go back into debt. Because we didn't have our savings yet. So we had to get a loan and put some things on credit card. So the second time that we were in consumer debt, it was still consumer, of course, but it wasn't dumb like it was before. It was a necessity. My kids were, I think, about 8 through 14 at the time. And so after we got out of debt the second time, I did something that's probably against what Dave recommends, but because of the people that I live with, we really needed to take a little break and to have a celebration. So that next month, where we didn't have to pay any of our debt, I threw a party for our family. It was just our family. And I think Brene Brown says it best in her book of Daring Greatly, where she talks about the people who deserve to know things in your life are those people who are fighting in the arena with you. And that was my husband and my children. So when we didn't have to pay debt, I took that amount and I divided that up. So can you imagine as a child getting this envelope with hundreds of dollars? I wanted to teach my children a very valuable lesson, and they did, because my daughter just talked about it 6 months ago. So it definitely had an impact. It was a really, really great day and just a really tender moment in our family history. I think my mother-in-law says it best. She says and has told us several times that we are the only family that she knows of that operates without debt. So already at this point, you're going to be living like nobody else, because most people don't have money and they have debt. So those two steps right there are huge. The second or the third step after the second step is 3 to 6 months in savings. Now, because we had just had that terrible experience, and Dave talks about this, where 3 to 6 months is a guideline. If you are in a more of a high risk job, or your comfort level, you just need to save to that. So based on a lot of things, we actually have 12 months in savings. Now remember that this is for expenses. So when your debt goes down and some other obligations that you have, it's not going to be as much as your salary. Most people get freaked out and they're like, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to get that. But it's expenses. So it's not going to, yes, it's a big chunk, but it's not going to be as much as you think it is. So we have 12 months because of our experiences, and that we just keep in a money market. Because we were out of debt, of course, you roll that over and start saving with that. So that took me, I'm going to say probably 2 to 3 years I was working on savings. And then, as Dave talks about, when you're trying to do the right thing, some things will happen in your life. And unfortunately, one of those things was my grandma died, and she left us an inheritance. So we were able to finish out our savings. Now, of course, I would much rather have my grandma here, but I am very grateful for that. I consider that very sacred money. Dave talks about his wife and how if he talks about going anywhere near their emergency savings, how she just like tenses up and the hair on the back of her neck just stands on end. That's exactly how I am. When my husband talks about even mentioning using the savings for anything, I just freak out and get paranoid, and my anxiety shoots through the roof. So I know exactly what he's talking about. Women do have a security chip. For me, this is my security chip right here. So yes, if absolutely necessary, we will use it, and I'm very grateful that we have it, but it's definitely not something that we will go anywhere near. The fourth step, investing. This again, I don't know if I did this exactly how Dave would recommend, but back here, it was really, really hard for me to leave money on the table. And by that meaning, when you are with a company, they usually do some kind of company matching with your 401k. So even though we weren't able to save 15% at the time and invest that, I really felt like we needed to save the minimum amount to get the company matching. So that's what we did kind of all through this step. And then once we got our savings, we were able to increase our investing to 15%. We have several Roth IRAs. We also have a Roth 401k, and then we have some investments in my husband's company. So that's what our investment is made up of. Personal development funding is basically education for either you or your spouse or your children, or any type of career development types of things. Dave talks about when you are a parent, especially, and you have a choice between feeding your children and putting food on the table or saving for their education. Of course, you need to choose feeding them and their needs. And so that's where we found ourselves. There was no money, absolutely no money to save for our children's education. But there's no shame in that, as he talks about. And for reasons that I think all of you have had these experiences in your life, when you need the money, somehow it appears. It's not magic, it just somehow all works out. When my children started going to college, they were able to either get scholarships, or we were able to have some money to help them. And we've talked a lot to them about not taking out student loan debt if absolutely necessary. We have also talked to them about just being really grateful, because my son is now graduating this upcoming semester with no student loan debt. And what a great blessing that is, and how unusual that is. Most people graduate with so much student loan debt. So we've really talked to them about just being grateful and working hard, and they've turned out to be just really great, hardworking young adults. So it's worked, and it'll work out, I promise you. The sixth step where we are now is paying off your mortgage. Now, I mentioned my husband hasn't really seen the vision of Dave Ramsey. He's still questioning at this point, after all these years, why we need to pay off our mortgage. But because we're in a relationship and a companionship, he has seen how happy I have been through this, and he has been grateful through all of this. So he is going along with it because essentially he wants to make me happy, and he knows that that's the best thing for our family. So that's where we're sitting right now. It has been a very long journey, very arduous, lots of ups and downs, but 2 steps forward and 1 step back, it's still progress. And that's what we're going for. We're going for progress and not perfection. I think that we'll probably end up paying off our house in 2 to 3 years. Based on our experiences, it's going to be more like 3, but that's really great. It's a really great place to be. Each step as you go along will give you a lot more peace and a lot more freedom. So I wanted to talk about when your spouse is not really on board. The ultimate thing that you need to remember is what Susie Ormond says, who's another personal finance person that's really great. She talks about that people and relationships are always going to be more important than money and things. And you just need to keep that in mind. So ultimately, yes, I would have loved to have my husband gazelle intense and right there with me and backing me up. But he wasn't. And so I chose my marriage and my husband over getting through this faster and causing a lot of contention. So that's just what you need to remember is work on your relationship first and your marriage before you can work on money. And then just work with each other's strengths and not focus on your weaknesses, which I know sounds really, really cliche and is very hard to do. For my husband, he's a really big picture person. He's a really hard worker. He's super focused on his career. And he's really good at that, where I am really good at the mundane, nitty-gritty details of life. So how we have come to a consensus is that he does his thing and he goes out and makes the majority of the money for our family. And then when he brings it home, it's now my job to make that go as far as possible and to be a wise steward, as the scriptures say, to just make the best decisions. So that's worked out really well for us. He hasn't actively gotten in my way along these steps, but he definitely has not been there right along with me, changing behaviors and crunching numbers and all those kinds of things. But it's worked out. So realize that you can do this journey with or without a spouse. If you're single, you can definitely do this as well. Just realize that it's going to be longer and harder. You're going to have to be stronger. When you are weak, as we all are, I've made plenty of mistakes. Just you're not going to have the luxury of having a spouse to back you up and be strong when you're weak. But you just dust yourself off, you pick yourself up and get right back on the wagon, and you just keep on going. It's not, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep going forward. And it's just not a competition with anybody else. We all win with this system. It doesn't really matter what your situation is. Just go through the steps. I had an interesting experience. I was in a book club about 12 years ago, and I picked Dave's book, Total Money Makeover. And all my friends at the time were like, are you out of your mind? Like, this is the dumbest book. But it was interesting because when we actually got to the book club night, they had completely changed. And they all told me how grateful they were and how it completely had blown their mind and just rocked their world. And they were just thanking me, which it didn't have anything to do with me. It had everything to do with Dave's system, but just how much they appreciated that, and it really changed their lives. And as far as I know, every single one of them is still on Dave's program and working it. So, and we had such a wide range of occupations at the time. We had people in the military, we had doctors, we had pilots. Salary just does not matter. This program works for everybody. We've all seen wage workers or heard stories of people that have become millionaires. And we've also seen the flip side where multimillionaires have become broke and lost all their money. So it just works for everybody. The financial principles remain the same. And just the last thing I would just want to mention is that money is just really interesting, isn't it? If money was only strictly numbers and the simple math that we learned back in grade school, we'd all be financial wizards, wouldn't we? But money just really has a lot to do with emotions, because we're dealing with our dreams and people and our goals in life and just our values. So it's just a really kind of emotional subject. Having money to me just means that you have more freedom and choices and the peace that Dave talks about. So keep on going, everybody. It's worth it. Like I said, I'm not quite done, but I can see the finish line. It's great. It's a great place to be. And I hope that everybody is able to find their way, and whatever situation is, I hope that I've been able to at least give you some hope with my journey and how I've had to deal with a lot of trials in our journey. But I will do my next video on how to have budget meetings both with your spouse and with your children. And then we're getting close to the end. So anyway, keep on going, everybody, and thank you for watching as usual. I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.